welcome to our show. We are Megan
And Katie,
two white girls stumbling through our current political and social climate.
attempting to be advocates for all people and wanting to share our mistakes, learn from others, and support those working through the times we live in.
So basically, Katie and I got together and decided that we want to use this podcast as a time to discuss how we are trying to advocate for all, like we said, all people in this really extremely difficult time. We're also going to kind of use it as a coping mechanism for ourselves, of our frustrations, our anger. Hopefully, share some ideas, get some ideas from listeners on what we can all do to come together and make America truly a better place.
So, to kind of introduce like who we are and where we're coming from and why we're even doing this. So for me, hi, Katie again. So basically some background for me is that I grew up in a mostly white, very small college town in the middle of nowhere, Ohio. That really could have transformed me into being the type of person who just went with what the status quo said. But because of my parents and their personality traits, their view of justice and what was right and was wrong, I was a lonely Democrat in a sea of Republicans. Both of my parents encouraged my independence, confidence, and sense of justice from a very young age. So there was there was a time where I was constantly fighting in a world that I would like to go back to, honestly, in what we live in now. But growing up in my high school, there was just this sense of, everyone was just a Republican because they had to be. And I was really the only person who also was vocal in classes or was fighting against this idea that other people who are different than me didn't deserve more or didn't deserve equal treatment or didn't deserve, a sense of morality, that because they were different sucks to suck, then you suck. So then when I went to university, the same university as Megan, what up, what up?
Mm-hmm.
I started studying human rights, which was kind of such an easy major for me because it was like it was built for me. It was classes were made up of ones where we discussed social justice, human trafficking, genocide, racism, gender equality. I learned what redlining was, things that I didn't even know were a problem because of where I grew up. I learned were a problem, that these were things that were designed to keep people down. So I just continued my passion through that. And then through school, I discovered an internship opportunity with a refugee resettlement program in the area. So dream career acquired. And I've been in it ever since. So I found what I wanted to do the rest of my life, which is kind of rare, I think, for someone at the age of, what was I, 22, to decide that this was kind of what I wanted forever, which is kind of a good thing, bad thing, considering what we're dealing with now. So,
A little bit of a curse.
yeah, which is nice. For 5 years, I worked in a variety of positions as within the refugee resettlement world, basically walking refugees through being acculturated and becoming self-sufficient in Ohio. While doing that, I really got to see more of the impacts of poverty, racism, and immigration, and how they, really are what anyone battles with daily. It's just this concept of that poverty is kind of the root of all of the evil, and I'm sure Megan will touch on that as well. But through that work, I really got to see that not only refugees had to fight through this system, but everyone kind of had to fight through this system, and especially minorities. So with the election of 2016, I had, such an issue with it myself, as well as watching my clients lived through a fear of being, you know, told that they would have to go home, the home that they fled because they were threatened for their life. Like, to get a refugee status isn't some easy task. So it was just this constant battle of just like people who had horrible opinions getting to share them. Like, keep your shitty opinion to yourself. Excuse my French.
I used to do that.
Yeah. So it's like, it's one of those things where it's like, it's just beyond disgusting. So through my work in resettlement in Ohio, I was eventually laid off in 2017, but then I found another job at a national headquarters resettlement agency. So the way resettlement's structured is national headquarters and then across the nation. So now I'm on the East Coast, but unfortunately, with the continued attacks by the current administration, I'm being laid off again due to the lowest numbers of refugee arrivals in history taking place. And I just want to share, you know, correct information on refugee resettlement, on immigrants, and the need to fight and protect some of the most vulnerable populations that we have in this country. And it's really timely right now with, you know, everything that's going on. So it's not unusual or unheard of, but that's where I'm at now. So Megan, let's talk about you.
Good times and fun employment for Katie.
Yay.
Yay. Thanks, Trump. So like Katie said, I'm Megan. Katie and I do know each other from university. I feel very British saying university.
I like to say it.
I like to say it too, university. We do know each other from university or college. But way before that, I grew up not 45 minutes from Katie. We didn't meet until we went to college. But she grew up in kind of, you know, the middle of nowhere. I was definitely suburban America. My family was a middle class in a predominantly upper middle class area. I didn't really know we had less money than everybody else, but looking back and talking to my parents now, we definitely did. But, you know, my story is similar to Katie's in the sense that growing up where I did, in the climate that I did, I could have been a very different person. And my brother and I talk a lot about that. So my story kind of begins with my mother's story. Especially, you know, both my parents definitely, but especially my mother's story. So my mother, not to speak too much for her, but she grew up in Loveland, Ohio. So shout out to Loveland, which is as adorable as it sounds. And as definitely predominantly white as it sounds. And, you know, she had wonderful parents. My grandparents were wonderful. She went to a great Catholic school. She went to University of Cincinnati, married my dad. They had some travels with the military. And when they came back, she took the first job that she could find in teaching. And that was with Cincinnati Public. That was not an intentional choice on her part. It was a we need to eat choice on her part. But it definitely changed the course of her and the rest of my family, I think. She, at Cincinnati Public, I think she probably learned a lot of things. Maybe someday we'll have her on the show. If she's brave enough, she can tell us. Yes, Jean. But I think one of the things that she learned that she brought to me at a young age and my brother was the civil rights movement and just Black America's fight in general for freedom. And so as a really little girl, I watched Ruby Bridges, the Disney movie, probably as much as I watched Beauty and the Beast. It was a fantastic film if you have not seen it. I loved Ruby Bridges. She is and was my all-time hero. We talked about Dr. King all of the time. We talked about, you know, children's books that had different types of stories in them that you wouldn't hear. The Children's March. And through that, learning about that movement, I felt empowered that I could do anything, that I could also change the world. And so when I went to elementary school with mostly white students, not all, but mostly, we would have, you know, Black History Month, and they'd be like, this is Black History. And I'd be like, Black History? I like these people too. These are my heroes. They're not just Black heroes. So I kind of lived in these two different worlds, visiting my mom's school, being there, getting to participate in the Black History programs that would go on all year, and getting to know that sacred history. And then also my white suburban life, where it was talked about very briefly. And we'll do another episode. I'd love to do another episode on the whitewashing of that movement in general. And Dr. Yep. King. Oh yeah, we'll unpack all that. But I was never sold that version. I knew that he had, from a young age, I knew that he had said things like rioting is the voice of the voiceless, and things like that. So it was a different way I learned about him than the way that we were supposed to learn about him in a white school. So growing up, I kind of always knew that I didn't really belong there. So I did go to college. I went into teaching because my mother was a teacher. I decided to get a degree in urban education as well. So I have a certificate in urban education. And through that, we had a lot of really fantastic conversations about microaggressions and educational pedagogy that's important for all children, not just the what you would call normal compliant child or normal white compliant child. Katie's doing the air quotes. So yes, exactly. What is normal? And again, we'll do lots of other episodes on that and on public education. But I learned a lot. And I learned a lot about creating intentional relationships with people who aren't like yourself, which was another thing that was really pushed at home, at my church, growing up, and with me in college. It was about building relationships. You're not there. You don't go meet people to fix people. You don't go into a community to fix a community. You visit a community to know the community and to be a part of the community. So fast forward to post-grad, I worked in the same city that I went to university, once again, British word, for 2 years. I saw the stark contrast in education handed to white children than Black children.
Yes.
It was incredibly alarming. It was one of the scariest and most eye-opening 2 years of my life. A lot of mistakes were made on my part, especially my first 2 years of teaching, and I can share some blog excerpts on our blog that I did at the time when I was teaching. I definitely learned a lot. Those 7th graders taught me more than I probably taught them. Sorry, guys. But thank you. And then I moved to a different area, a different district, a district that was smaller, able to give a little more of an equitable education. We are considered an urban district, but we are by no means urban. We're not in a metropolitan city area. The only reason it would be called urban would be because we serve primarily African American students. We have rural white students as well. So we have an interesting mix of a lot of different challenges and fantastic opportunities, honestly, in my district. And I've really enjoyed learning from that as well. I teach 5th grade now. It is definitely my current dream job. I think that I'm wrestling where to go next, especially with the current administration and wanting equal education for all. There is a Norman Rockwell painting, if you don't know it, of Ruby Bridges, and it's called The Problem We All Live With. And it's a really telling painting of just this little girl surrounded by all of these adults. And so I really I look at that poem and I kind of almost want to name it The Problem We Still Live With, because education is so starkly separate and unequal still, based on socioeconomic status, based on race, based on gender equality, LGBTQ rights at schools. It can be really complicated to go to school in America for kids. And I think we're starting to see a lot of that. And it makes me nervous and passionate as a human, as a mother, as a teacher. So that's kind of where I'm coming from. Katie and I have had so many conversations over the years. We're definitely like kindred spirits, I would say.
Yeah.
And we just really want to share some of the things we know, because I think there are a lot of people in America just awakening to some of these problems. I heard a comedian say it was like, he's never paid attention before, But before, when you're like, someone's fairly good at their job, like, okay, like, I'm assuming, things are kind of okay. And he's like, now we have, like, a horse in the White House. I really need to pay attention because there's, like, a fucking horse in the White House. So
Yeah.
I think that
I
there's
mean,
a lot of people awakening. Go ahead.
I mean, it's just one of my favorite examples is of my mom being like, "Well, we live in a very diverse town, like on our street, there's like 4 or 5 black families." And I was like,
4
"Mom,
or 5. Wow.
we live on the street with all the black
They're
families.
the only ones.
There, there's no others really in our town." And she was like, "Oh, you're right." And I'm like, "Uh-huh." And she was like,
And I think people are having all of these aha moments. So we wanted to kind of address some of those, give people a space to safely listen about some of those. We also want to be called on our own crap. Katie and I are not immune.
"Absolutely."
Please, we're not immune to mistakes. We do have a Twitter. We have an email that we'll push out at the end of this episode. Please reach out to us. Let us know what we could do better. When we give information, if you feel like something is not correct or something's not completely a well-rounded picture, we will definitely have apology episodes. Not really apology, but kind of fixer episodes where we'll fix any misconceptions that might be out there.
And also, if anybody wants to come and be a guest to
come talk to us.
fully explain their point of view or kind of shed light on something that Megan nor I have much knowledge on, like, I can speak a lot to refugees or immigrants, but that doesn't mean I am the end all be all for all of the information on either of those topics.
And there are plenty of things happening right now, especially when it comes to budget, when it comes to public health. These are topics that Katie and I know very little about. So please come talk to us. Please let us know if you'd like to be a guest. Our future episodes, our next episode will be Katie's refugee resettlement episode. It's basically going to be a refugee resettlement 101. I will do a public education episode. We'll go through the history of public education, why I think it's important, and what the heck is happening now. I think a lot of people are undereducated about the educational system. And we'll talk about the Me Too movement. I know that's something that Katie and I can both personally speak to. We will talk about microaggressions for all walks and types of people. We'll do a lot of different episodes. Go ahead.
I know that we'll definitely, along with Me Too, is that a lot of something that Megan and I talk about regularly is the female experience.
Mm-hmm.
Not just only us, but also, from perspectives of people of color, trans perspectives. Megan is the one who, out of the two of us, has had kids. So she's going to have a perspective in terms of being a mother, what that looks like. And I can give more of the perspective on the single life, how that looks on, for me, and just how those relationships unfold, mental health. Megan and I have had really interesting conversations on enhancing communities or gentrification, people with disabilities, different experiences. Neither one of us are LGBTQ plus, so it's like, we're going to have conversations on that, but that would be where we may have a guest to come on and speak more on that. So nothing is really off limits, but it's more of just like what we can really give our opinions on, or give factual evidence on, is where we're kind of behind. So
yeah, I think facts are really where it hits. This Ravenclaw really wants to put some facts into the world, because it's
Slytherin
doesn't care.
Isn't evil, but is still interested in factual evidence before my hatred unfolds.
I think so. But I also think we will also be putting out a blog after every single episode. It'll have resources. It'll have further information if you're interested. So look to that. We will have a Twitter and a email account. So I'll go ahead and let Katie throw those out there. And look for our next episode on refugee resettlement.
Woohoo! Yeah. Refugee 101. That's my bread and butter. So our Twitter is 2, like the number sign, 2 white girls show, but SHO1 instead of like show. And then our email is 2 white girls show @gmail.com. And then our blog is 2, same thing, numbers 2, white girls show refugee.wordpress.com. So we will also provide all the links to the podcast as well as everything else on all of the forms of social media, so anyone can find us or get connected with us. And yeah,
so thanks for coming on this adventure with us. More to come. So Katie and I are signing off, and look for our very first meet episode on refugee resettlement. Thanks, guys.
Love you guys.
Bye.